Hello and welcome to the Next Level Art Vlog. It's great to have you with me today. If you're new here, my name's Leigh Wilson and today I want to take you on a special journey inside of Tasmania's Botanical Gardens. There's this beautiful scene. If anyone knows of Monet, of course you would do, famous painter. He spent 30 years of his life painting lily pads and lily ponds in his own specially made garden, and it's just how someone can dedicate 30 years of their life to paint one subject is just incredible. I'm going to channel a bit of Monet today, and we're going to paint basically this little lily pad painting you see beside me here. So before we get started, I'd like to just address one thing. This is quite a long video and it's split into two sections. The first section is just a small snippet of how I painted the painting, so it goes for about a minute where you'll see the whole process. But after that, there's 45 minutes of real-time footage of how I painted this painting, and I really do encourage you to watch on and take a look at that. I'll put the timestamps in the video so you can just click through to that if you like. Keep watching and you'll get to the tutorial. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's paint a lily pad scene. Let's go. So that's a short little trailer for you today, and look, before we get to the full tutorial, I'd really love it if you would subscribe to my channel. It really does support me and help me make more of these videos. I'd love to make you more in the future. I can only do that if you subscribe along, so please do. And look, let's get into this full-length tutorial.
The colours we're using today: titanium white, cadmium yellow medium, pyrrole orange, naphthol crimson, viridium green hue, Payne's grey, ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple, burnt umber. The brushes today are 1 1/4 dagger striper and a number 6 angle flat. For the composition, I recommend you divide up your canvas into thirds in both directions. You'll end up looking like a tic-tac-toe board. For our focal point today, I want it to be in the lower left third of the painting. So So I'll just mark that in here now. For our other two flowers, I want it to be in line, but not quite with the focal point. So I want just to trail off that rule of thirds there, so it doesn't look too contrived or made up.
Okay, so just want to briefly talk about the focal point. The focal point in a painting is the subject you want people to focus the most on. Doesn't mean they can't look around your painting. A good composition will get people to look around your painting, and the painting will have little vectors in it that will point back to the focal point. So just to give you an example of the human eye, our human eye can really only see one thing in focus. When you really look at something, that is in focus. Everything else around it is not. Now if you really look, you only read the label on one of these at any one time. Your eye doesn't really look at all of them and read all of them at once. It can't. So just to highlight this further, if we focus in on the first bottle, the second bottle is just that slightly bit more blurry, and our last bottle, as you can see in the distance, you just can't see it. Our eyes work this way, but our brain's so capable it will fill in a lot of larger scenes for us. And if we click on the middle bottle, our first bottle becomes out of focus. We're reading the label on the second bottle. Yes, the last bottle is a little bit clearer, but we still can't read both of them at once. Focus on the last bottle, and once again, the last bottle is more predominant. So what we want to do in this painting, you want to focus on that first flower. The next flower is slightly smaller, slightly less in focus. The last flower will leave as a blur, just a hint of a flower. Right, let's move on to the next section.
If you don't have one of these colour wheels, go out and grab one now. They will save you hours of frustration. You get to know the complementary opposites.
Colour mixing, it's a theory in itself. I won't go into that here today, but I just want to get you to start thinking about colour mixing for the reference that you're using or the painting you're going to paint. So in other words, mix the colours before you paint the painting. So you know that you can mix that colour. It makes the process so much easier. It could be a day before, it doesn't matter. You've gone through, had a little bit of a practice at mixing. Just on this little palette here, these are all acrylic paints. I would normally only show you the primary colours and burnt umber. This green's a bit of a ring in here in this row, but look, I think that for this exercise, if you have at least a good mid to dark green, it will help you out painting this painting. Now the orange you don't see here, we just use that for toning the canvas. And the reason being that I suggest the orange for toning your canvas, when you're painting a pretty green subject, when you're new, you tend to not mix warm greens. They tend to all be just blue and yellow or green, and they're not very warm. So having that orange undertone just gives that hint of warmth to your greens, and it'll give you a bit more depth to it. So we'll start off with burnt umber. Tried and true burnt umber. There's no blacks on here, so the only way to mix your black is with burnt umber, a bit of cobalt blue. Now that will go pretty dark, almost black. You can play around adding a bit more burnt umber if you want a bit more brown undertone, or a bit more cobalt blue if you want a blue undertone. This goes down the line, so we take our burnt umber again, And yes, I'm using a dirty brush. It doesn't bother me too much. I like sometimes how the colours sort of break into each other. Dirty mixing, and look, I know some people don't like it. I don't mind it, especially if you're painting like this. It's what I call like a messy type scene. There's a lot going on, but we really only want to highlight certain areas of the painting. So I don't mind colours breaking into each other. So we've got that burnt umber down again. If we use our Payne's grey, which is quite dark anyway, then we start getting into a richer or a darker colour again. That goes quite dark indeed. That you'd get you pretty much almost black with that. As you know, those two colours are fairly similar. This just drops it down another value again. Now once again, well, there's a little bit of Payne's grey left on there, but that's okay. I'll just wipe a bit of that off. So we go to burnt umber again. If we go to our dioxazine purple, now this is one of my favourite shadow colours. It just gives you this really interesting hue in your shadows. I think it just adds another element to your painting. Rather than just using the tried and true blue and burnt umber, I think this really just adds another warmth element to your painting. You can get it with your red and your burnt umber. You can get sort of a lighter reddy tone. I'll just mix that now just so you can see that. But it still goes quite dark. It just turns to the side of more towards red. Obviously the more burnt umber you put in there, it can go a little bit more chocolatey. Okay, so that's those two mixed, and obviously our dioxazine gives us that really dark violety colour. Now what we can also do, just to get a really dark green, we can also take that viridian green that's already pre-mixed, that's that straight out of the bottle. Okay, so that nice green hue, put it in with a bit of burnt umber, and we can get a really dark green out of that. The more burnt umber you put in there, the darker it will go. And that gets you probably one of your darkest greens if you ever want to mix a really dark green. That's a really good one. So that sort of gets most of our shadow colours done. Just the other shadow I like, and look, for sometimes generally you can use straight burnt umber. It just depends what you're trying to do with your shadow. Sometimes I'll pick up straight Payne's grey. That's why I really like that colour. It just gives you that pop of blue when you need that coolness. Dioxazine purple, not so much because it's such a strong colour. You just get that real purple, but for the shadow around the flower, this is really good to use too. Or in the water, where you just want that nice purple to really shine through. There's nothing wrong with that. So that gets all that dark, so as you can see, it's pretty much burnt umber mixed with all our dark colours. Obviously you can mix and match all these together and you get so many different hues. We get back onto our greens now, and obviously, you know, we've got one of our darkest greens here already pre-mixed. Okay, so this is definitely a mid-green, but it's quite a bright mid-green. And you probably say to yourself, well, that's pretty stark in this painting, it's not going to look very good. Especially compared to, say, this darker green we mixed with the burnt umber. What we can do with it is attack it with a tiny bit of yellow. Just desaturate it slightly, but it gives it on the hint of the yellow side. So I'll just go back in, paint that straight green hue again, and as you can see, it's a lot lighter. We've desaturated, well, we haven't really desaturated as such, we've just added yellow to it, which has certainly turned it more of an olive colour. That's certainly a colour I use a lot in this painting. It has a lot of green and yellow mixed together. Obviously we can take our blue and our yellow, which is our tried and trusted green. I always love this mix of green in a lot of paintings, and you can take that on the darker side if you want to go more of your blue and only a hint of yellow. And as you can see, it goes this darker hue. And to bring them back, now as you can see, they're quite green, and sometimes that green can get a bit in your face. So to bring them down, we can use our Untitled Crimson Red and desaturate them. You don't need much red. I probably put a little bit too much in there. Just mix that side. Yeah, I've used too much red. Alright, let's kill that. Anyway, we'll just say go into this one that's lightly mixed here. You can see how it just takes that green out. So if you go right through that, it just warms it up. So you can make warm greens. Start the process again with a basic green. It's a little dirty in there, so it sort of makes an olive green anyway. So we'll take some red. This time not so much, you just need a tiny amount of red. Yeah, almost like that, and see how immediately that's warmed up nicely there. So that's your warm olive just by adding your Untitled Crimson. That's definitely one that you'll probably see in this painting. And then we can go to the mint side. If you want to mix your own sort of minty colour, if we take a bit more of that yellow, and that green. And because there's yellow in there, it will stay on the yellowy green side. If we want to give it that real mint colour, we can take that straight Viridian hue, which as you know already has bright green colour there. And just hit it with a white, we can get that minty green. You will see that on some of the highlights in this painting too. But as you can see, it's not, you don't have to go crazy mixing all these colours together. You'll just get a big brown mess. So just keep your colour mixing simple. So a lot of our, just to recap, a lot of our shadows are just burnt umber and our cobalt blue. And then we get a variation with our dark colours down here. Our greens are always your hardest colour to deal with, because they can always turn a bit yellow on you. So if you do start off with mixing greens, start off with yellow first and just add a tiny bit of blue in. As you can see, when time you work it around, you know, it does turn green quite quickly. But our brighter greens we can mix with the Viridian green hue. And like I say, you grab that yellow, you can really make that pop into a frog green if you get the mix right. And obviously you can lighten it by adding a touch of white, but my caveat with titanium white, try not to use it all the time, mixing to lighten all these colours, because you'll just milk up your painting, and titanium white will just milk up every single part of your painting, and you lose that vibrancy. So as soon as you add some titanium white, see how it's turned milky and we lose our vibrancy. It makes it lighter hue, but we've lost that edge of that frog green and just made it a bit more minty. So I hope you get something out of this colour mix today.
So while I'm mixing this burnt umber, olive green shadow colour, basically for the water around the water lilies, I'll talk about this reference photo. This reference photo is going to be very useful to us. There's a lot of different lily pad shapes in there. It gives us the reference of our flowers as well. But what I really like about this one is the reeds in the background. So I want to bring them down to the first third of the painting, and I want to sort of chop off the foreground, I guess, of that reference photo and drop those flowers down. And our first flower is going to start on the lower left third of our painting. Okay, so now I'm going to set you a task. What I really want you to do now is just watch for the colours that we mixed earlier in the colour mixing section, and watch them pop up on the canvas. And you can see what I'm trying to do with the reference photo, and I'm just taking certain aspects of the reference photo, just the colours, and I'm just trying to recreate that in certain areas. Now, as you can see the process, I'm not trying to lay heaps and heaps of paint, I'm just slowly building it up. And what I find with acrylics is this seems to be the best approach. Now, while we're on the subject of thin paints, I really do like the runnier or soft body versions of acrylics. I think they're so much easier to get you started. You don't have to worry about mixing water with them. They're just great straight out of the tube. Now, these Atelier are a more matte version. They'll all dry matte, and that's very good for certain things if you like your matte paints. And if you're into a little bit shinier paint, then I'd suggest the golden acrylics are very good as well. They have a bit more of a luster to them, and also the Liquitex soft body, they had really good results with that as well. I tend to like the matte paints at the moment, so I generally use the Atelier free flows. Now, while I talk about paints, I hope you're still watching the colours pop up here, as I'm starting to break into a bit of dioxazine purple, bit of ultramarine blue, sort of canvas mixing there, just to change it up a little bit. Now, just back on the paints, I painted all this painting with the thinner version. If you're going to really add detail in, then that's where you use the thicker version over the top in the last few layers, and sort of acts like a impasto type paint that'll just give you leave a few brush marks in there, which really does add a bit of depth to your painting. While we're on the subject of detail, this painting is definitely not detailed. What I'm trying to do with this painting is capture that impressionistic version, I guess. Yes, in certain aspects I'll throw some realism in, which is where when I paint that focal point, I'll highlight that the most. So I try to make that in focus the most, I guess. And you know, lily pads, the human eye is really strange how it will render things just in your brain, and I hardly paint a real lily pad in this whole painting. They're all just mismatch of shapes. So I've forgotten to tighten the top nut on the easel here, and yeah, it's come out of the groove. Anyway, we just readjust that and move on. But so while we're on the subject of easels, thanks easel, this is actually a French easel. It's my plein air easel, and I do suggest these. These are great, even for studio work. They hold a lot of gear, hold a lot of brushes, a lot of paints. Yes, they are a little bit heavier than a little Pochard box, but you can paint larger canvases. And if you're really starting out, this will get you by for a long time. Now, this easel, Australian dollars, cost me $119, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I do highly recommend them. Now, I know some people don't like lugging them around, but you know, that's the trade-off. So back into this painting, and I'm just working into the water now, and I'm just painting the shadows there. Now I tend to pull down a lot, do downward strokes where possible in the bigger areas, because I know that gives you that water reflection. So if you pull down ways or downward strokes while you're painting the water, it will give that sort of reflective look to it. Regardless of the colour you use, it doesn't really matter. Here it's dark, but as you can see, it's got reeds in it, so the water's fairly dirty looking, I guess. Well, it's time to paint some lily pads, and I'm just looking to paint mid-tones at the moment, and shapes basically. Now, as I said earlier, I don't really paint any lily pads in this painting, hardly at all. Maybe some out in the open just to give that impression of shape. So my theory for having a realistic object is having 3 tones, at least 3 tones. So a dark, a mid, and a highlight. And I think if an object has 3 tones, you'll make it look realistic, even if it's painted fairly abstractly, like I'm going to do here with a lot of these lily pads. I'll have dark green, mid green, and a highlight or a light green basically, which will give the impression that it has some shape to it. If I only have 2 tones, or obviously 1, it's going to look fairly flat. And once again, we're not after realism, we're trying to trick our eye into realism. As you saw at the start of this video, we're keeping the colour mixing simple so you can easily achieve this painting. Now all we're doing now is stacking these lily pads up, painting probably individual ones just to get a feel of how to paint them. I've never painted lily pads before this, so I'm just sort of working it out as I go along, just twisting my brush around, just making shapes, varying the colours of the greens, going between the darks and the lights. You probably see me muck around at the bottom of this painting for a little while, and that's because, like I say, I'm just getting a feel for the lily pads and how probably easily I can make them, I guess. And then once I sort of get that down a bit, I speed up and paint through the mid-ground, and we go back and hone these as we go. So as you saw when I first started painting this section, I was using the Moderna No. 6 angled flat, and I really like that for blocking in big portions of the painting. And now I've obviously jumped over to that Princeton 1 1/4 dagger striper, and the shape of it's like a curved knife basically, or a curved scalpel, and you can really curve each of those leaves, twist your brush around, get some interesting shapes with it. So I really like these little Princeton dagger brushes. Normally when I'm painting a painting, I'm painting from the obviously the distance back to the foreground. Generally, you got a sky and mountains and whatnot. I'm usually painting that type of scene, and this one I found it better to actually go from the bottom up, basically because it sort of slopes in up under these reeds at the back, and I thought that would be a better approach here. Paint some bigger leaves down the bottom, and lily pads, I should say leaves, they look like leaves. It really did help out here actually, because it gave a little bit of perspective to it as I was painting, about it sloping from the front to the back, and I actually preferred doing it that way this time. You can probably see that group of lighter coloured lily pads or yellowy coloured lily pads, and just highlighting that area where the first flower is going to sit, just to lighten it up, to bring your attention to the focal point more. So I hope you can see here, it does take a little while to build up those lily pads, and you do have to stick with it. Don't get frustrated with it. Just keep plugging away. They'll come together. Just keep working through the scene. You will get results. Just try not to rush it. Take your time. It doesn't matter if the paint's dry. The beauty about acrylics, that's the best part of it. You can paint an area of the painting, and the other one dries underneath as you go, and you can just keep layering over and over and over it. That's why I like these thinner paints. You can't get yourself into strife. If you put loads of thick paint down, it leaves you nowhere to go and you end up with a mess on the canvas. With this, you can just put the right amount down. 10 minutes time, it's already started to go off, or even gone off, and you can just keep going back over it. And you'll see we do that several times in this painting, where I'll just go back in and adjust a side of a leaf somewhere. I just have that colour on my brush and I just plant it around the painting, and that's the beauty of acrylics. If you are time poor like I am and only paint at night time, look, it's fantastic. You actually can get quite a lot done with acrylic paints, and don't believe for a minute you can't get super detailed paintings out of it, because you can. I've been able to do it, and they look fantastic. There's no real difference. The only difference I find is they take a lot more layering. They seem to be thinner, and probably, I guess they're a bit, something to say they're a bit plasticky, and I can sort of understand their terminology for acrylic paints, because they don't have that. I guess you can paint in oil paint, say you paint a blue, you get a lot of different colours of that blue in a one stroke. With acrylic paints, it doesn't quite have that luster to it, but you can achieve it, and that's why I tend to throw a lot of different colours into my shadows, and a lot of different colours into the main subject, because it just adds a lot more interest, and you can still get really good results that way. because I hate being keep my eye on the colours pop up, and look, I dance between the lighter yellows and the greens, and I turn to the olives. Also found better ways to paint these lily pads, and you can really sort of twist and press the brush around, and you just get a bigger lily pad a lot faster than what I was painting at the start of the painting. Really liked how there was a few of these half dead leaves in this lily pond. Why not honour those as well? So yes, your yellow and blue, and a little bit of your naphtha crimson red. Get this nice little deeper yellow olive colour, and I'll just paint a few of those in. Now, I've always been fascinated with John Constable's work, where his paintings look so realistic, and you get up to them and there's nothing there, they're just heaps of brush marks. They look so abstract up close. And even though we're channeling Monet's water lilies today, I always seem a lot channeling John Constable a little bit, where I want this scene to really look not very nice up close, I guess, and a bit more abstract. But when you just step back and pull away a little bit, it really does look like a lily pad scene. And I was pretty chuffed at the end result with this. But you continue watching and you'll see what I mean at the end, where I finally get it finished. Hope you watch through the end and see the results. So we're starting to get back into that water colours, and you can see that dioxazine purple's making an appearance. And you pull down with that in the water, and it really does make the water for you virtually instantly. It's great. Also leave the bit of underpainting underneath that, and it's virtually those reeds reflecting in the water, so that does actually work well. Now I'll start getting a little bit more aggressive here and freeing up a bit, and just really going for it here soon. I'll get on a roll, I guess, and start to lay some paint in, and away we go. As we get close to the end here, I really start laying those reeds in the background. I don't really mess around. Just grab your colour and swipe down. You know, I'm after that abstractness, but still, like, once again, you step back and it looks like real reeds, but it's not really up close. It looks like horrible brushwork, and I really like that about painting, how you can just fool the eye, and that's what this painting's all about. We're hoping to fool the eye. Once again, it's varying that reed colour. It just adds depth. Paint them all one colour and they'll just hang at the same level, but vary the colours, and some come forward, some go into the background. It's a really good illusion. Now, we talked about this earlier on in colour mixing. We've left our white out of this painting right to basically the reeds and just a few of these highlights. Really want some crisp looking lily pads just around this back third here, just to let you rest your eye there as you come back around. So here I'm just highlighting a couple of lily pads at the bottom here. I just want to lead your eye up and just grab you at that start point and bring you up through the painting. I thought those dead lily pads really need to be brought up, and just highlight a few of those again rather than have them look a little bit flat. Now, as I said at the start of this painting, and why the reason was to paint this on this orange ground, and I think you can see by the amount of greens here, I think it just warms it up slightly. It doesn't make it look so bland, and I like how some of it's still left showing through. It really adds to the painting, I think, so I leave it at that as it is. Just start throwing some abstract dirty colour into the water, just to give the impression of that sort of dead colour underneath the lily pads. Now, while I have this colour, you'll also see me flick some water reflections through, and this is just done really quickly, spasmodically, just to once again add that abstract. We're almost to those flowers, and really naphthalene crimson, a little bit of white makes your pinks, and a bit of dioxazine purple, naphthalene crimson makes your darker shadows in these flowers, and this base just and a bit of naphthalene crimson straight out, so the red. So those three mixes, really that's all you need to make these flowers. I don't mess around with them forever, just quickly make them up. Now you'll see here that I do this last flower too well. I can't have it looking better than the first one, so we just obliterate that flower and make it look blurry again. Well, we're almost there, just a couple little minor adjustments here and there, just a couple more highlights, and look, there is a slight bit of glare on this painting. You'll probably notice that most of the way through. That's the light that's shining on it, and when you see the real shot of it when it's done, you'll notice the difference. Well, I have to say, in good light, this has turned out brilliant. I'm really stoked with it, but we're not quite finished with it yet. Being just a small colour study, we're just using a water-based satin varnish, one coat, to give it some protection, bring back the colours. I do have other varnish videos on my channel, you can check those out if you like. We're finished, yes, but once it's done, why not treat your artwork to a really nice frame. It really does make the world of difference.
Well, thanks for watching, and I do hope this inspires you to get your paintbrushes out and get into it. Even if you're just starting out, I'm sure this is a painting that you can paint along with. Please feel free to use any of the reference material you see in the video. You can screenshot that, go back and re-watch, learn to paint along with the painting itself. I've tried to keep all the pauses in there, mixing pauses, so you can actually go and mix your own colours up, so please do that. And look, let me know how you go with it. Leave a comment below in the comments. And look, you can find me also on Instagram at Leigh_Wilson_artist. There I post regularly, and look, if you like, tag me in your painting if you decide to paint it. I'd love to see it. And once again, look, please support this channel by subscribing. Hit that like button for me as well if you like this video. And look, as always, I'll see you soon.